The finger hovered inches from Jessica Okoye's face like a verdict. Not a threat. Not a warning. A public reminder that Damien Hart still believed he owned the right to humiliate her whenever it suited him. They were in the middle of a ballroom drenched in warm chandelier light, surrounded by the kind of wealth that made people smile with their teeth and judge with their eyes. The band on the stage had softened into background noise. Conversations had thinned into whispers. The crowd had formed a loose circle without admitting it. Jessica stood on the left side of the frame in a bright lilac gown, shoulders pulled in just a little, hands held together as if she could physically keep herself from shaking. She wasn't crying in the dramatic way movies loved. Her pain was quieter, controlled. The kind that lived in the jaw, in the tight blink, in the way her throat worked when she swallowed too many emotions at once. Damien stood in the center, immaculately dressed, smirking like he was doing the room a favor by putting her back in her place. He lifted his finger and talked as if he was explaining a lesson to a child. To the right, a man in a jet-black suit had just stepped into the scene. Kong Junaseo. He didn't look angry yet. He looked confused. Not confused about what he was seeing, but about why it was happening. His brows drew together, subtle and sharp. His gaze cut from Damien's raised finger to Jessica's face, and something in his expression tightened as if a question had lodged behind his eyes. Who is this man? And why is he mocking my wife publicly? The room's laughter died slowly, like people turning down the volume when someone important walked in. And Damien, still trapped in his own arrogance, didn't even notice the shift. Not yet. Now, if you want stories that start like this and refuse to let go, stay with it to the end. Like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because this night didn't just expose an ex-husband's cruelty. It exposed the quiet strength of a woman who had survived something far worse than a man's pride. Jessica's gaze stayed locked on Damien, not because she was fearless, but because she was done performing weakness for people who fed on it. Damien's lips curved. Jessica, he said, slow and deliberate, so everyone could taste the name. I almost didn't recognize you. The words sounded harmless until the tone sharpened. Lilac, he added, as if he was amused by the color itself. You used to hide in gray. Now look at you. Trying to stand out. A few people chuckled. Not everyone. But enough. Jessica felt it like heat crawling up her neck. She forced her fingers to remain still, interlaced neatly in front of her body. She'd practiced stillness in hospitals and waiting rooms. She'd learned how to hold her face calm while her mind screamed. She wasn't going to let Damien see the tremor he wanted. This isn't the place, she said softly. Damien's smile widened. And yet, here you are. His voice carried just far enough for strangers to pretend they weren't listening while leaning in anyway. People loved the illusion of privacy when it wasn't their dignity on the line. Damien tilted his head, as if he was studying something that disappointed him. Let me guess. You came to prove something. You want everyone to see you and think, wow, Jessica is doing fine. Jessica got her life together. He clicked his tongue and lowered his finger slightly, like he was feeling generous. But you know what's funny, he continued. You were always good at appearances. Even when everything was falling apart. Jessica's throat tightened. The falling apart, he meant, wasn't the messy breakup. It wasn't the divorce. It wasn't even the years she spent trying to rebuild her life after leaving him. He meant the season when she got sick. The season when her body betrayed her, and the world treated her like a burden. The season Damien used as proof that she was too fragile to be loved. Jessica's eyes flicked downward for half a second. Then she lifted them again. Damien noticed. He always noticed when she fought the urge to retreat. That look, he said lightly. That little thing you do. Like you're about to cry but you won't, because you want to pretend you're strong. Jessica inhaled through her nose, slow, controlled. The ballroom felt colder than it should have. Or maybe it was her body remembering what it used to feel like when fear sat in her bones. She had promised herself she would never stand in front of Damien again. Not in any setting where he could weaponize an audience. And yet, here she was. Because this event wasn't for him. It was for the foundation. A cancer charity gala. A room full of donors and cameras and speeches about hope. The irony tasted bitter. Damien leaned in a fraction, lowering his voice like it was a secret, but keeping it loud enough for the circle to catch it anyway. "Tell me something," he said. "Did you come alone?" It wasn't a question. It was an attempt to confirm what he wanted the room to believe. That Jessica was still the same woman he left behind. Alone. Unchosen. Easy to mock. Jessica didn't answer immediately. Her silence made the crowd hungry. Damien's eyes gleamed. "Because if you're alone," he added, "then at least you're consistent." A few more laughs slipped out, sharper than the earlier ones. There was always someone in a rich room who laughed at pain because it proved they weren't the one bleeding. Jessica's lips parted. She wanted to say something that would slice through him cleanly. But she didn't want to perform. She didn't want to win. She wanted to walk away. Her feet didn't move. Behind Damien, the crowd shifted again. Not because of Jessica. Because of Junesio. He moved with the calm pace of a man who didn't hurry for anyone, but still got everywhere first. He didn't push through people. People moved for him, almost unconsciously, like their bodies recognized a kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. His suit was black, tailored so perfectly it looked poured onto him. Not flashy. Just expensive in the way that made other expensive things look like they were trying too hard. The light caught subtle detailing on his lapel, a quiet shimmer that suggested craftsmanship. His wristwatch sat like a signature. And then there was his face. Sharp jawline, clear skin, hair styled neatly, eyes dark, focused. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't scowling. He was reading the scene. His gaze landed on Jessica's expression, and something softened for half a second. Not weakness. Recognition. Like he understood what it meant to hold yourself together in public when everything inside you wanted to collapse. Damien finally noticed him, but only because the crowd did. Damien's eyes flicked right. He registered a tall, striking Korean man behind him. Damien's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned, more forced. He cleared his throat, still trying to control the narrative. "Well," Damien said, turning slightly, as if addressing Junesio was a casual decision. "Looks like you found a fan club." Junesio didn't respond. That silence was louder than any insult. Damien's smirk tightened. "You know her?" he asked, nodding toward Jessica as if she wasn't standing right there. Jessica felt her heart thud once, heavy. Not because she was ashamed of Junesio. Because she'd tried so hard to keep her life separate from Damien's world. Junesio stepped forward just one small pace. It wasn't aggressive. It was simply closer. Close enough to be heard. Close enough to be undeniable. He looked at Jessica first. It was a question without words. "Do you want me to speak?" Jessica's fingers tightened for a moment. Then she loosened them. Her chin lifted by a fraction. "Yes." Junesio turned to Damien. His voice was calm, low, controlled. The accent was light, just enough to remind the room that he wasn't from here, but he belonged anyway. "I'm her husband." The statement landed like a glass dropped onto marble. Not loud, just impossible to ignore. The circle's energy shifted. Heads turned. Eyes widened. Someone whispered, "Wait." Another voice, barely audible, "Kong Junseo?" Damien blinked. He laughed once, quick and sharp, like his brain rejected what it couldn't immediately categorize. "Husband," he repeated. "Jessica? Married." His gaze flicked over Juneso's suit, his face, his posture. Damien's smile tried to hold, but cracks formed in it. He looked back at Jessica, disbelief turning slowly into irritation. To him, Jessica didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She just stood there and let the truth exist. Damien tried to reclaim the room with humor. "Wow," he said. "Good for you. I didn't know you had it in you." The words were meant to sound generous, but they were still poisoned. Junesio didn't rise to it. He didn't argue. He simply looked at Damien's raised finger, then at Damien's face. Like he was studying a behavior he didn't respect. The crowd watched, sensing the direction the knight was leaning. Damien's pride didn't allow him to back away. "So," Damien said, folding his arms slightly, posture shifting to dominance again. "Who are you exactly?" A whisper cut through the back of the circle again. "It's him." Another. "That's Kong Junicio, the CEO." Damien's eyes flicked, trying to confirm. He looked around the room, noticing the way people's expressions were changing, not just toward Jessica, but toward the man beside her. His smile thinned. Junicio spoke again, calm as ever. "Someone who doesn't speak to women like that." Damien scoffed. "Like what?" Junicio's eyes shifted to Jessica's face. The smallest tightening in his gaze, as if he'd seen the strain in her jaw, the gloss in her eyes, the restraint she was forcing. "Like she's entertainment," Junicio said. That line silenced the laughs more effectively than shouting ever could. Damien's nostrils flared. He looked at Jessica as if he expected her to shrink, to apologize for her husband's presence. Jessica didn't. She remained still. But inside, memories stirred, sharp and unwanted. It wasn't just Damien's cruelty at parties. It was Damien's cruelty in quiet rooms. The day she found the lump and tried to tell him calmly because she didn't want to sound afraid. The way his face pinched, not with concern, but with annoyance. The way he asked how much it would cost. The way he later told his mother, loud enough for Jessica to hear, that he hadn't married a medical bill. Jessica's stomach twisted. She hadn't shared that story with many people. Even after she survived, she carried it like a scar people didn't need to see. Except Junicio had seen it. Not the medical part. The emotional part. The loneliness part. The part where she learned that surviving wasn't just about the disease. It was about surviving who people became when you needed them. Damien was still talking. "You don't know her," Damien said, trying to turn the room back into his stage. "You don't know what she's like when things get hard." Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't like where he was going. Junicio's gaze didn't waver. "I know enough." Damien's smile returned, colder. "Oh really? Because I know her. I was there when she—" Jessica's voice cut in, quiet but firm. "Don't." One word. Not loud. But it stopped him. Damien stared at her, surprised, then amused again. "Don't what?" "Tell the truth." Jessica breathed in slowly, fighting the old reflex to justify herself. The crowd was watching her now. Not because Damien pointed. Because she had spoken. Damien leaned closer, lowering his voice again like a secret for the room. "What do you tell him?" he asked, eyes glittering. "Do you tell him the full story? Or just the version where you're the victim?" Jessica's hands tightened again. Behind Damien, a few guests reacted, uncomfortable. Some smiled anyway, because cruelty was easier to enjoy when you didn't have to own it. Junicio's eyes flicked to Jessica. His expression changed slightly. Still controlled. Still restrained. But the confusion was fading, replaced by clarity. He was beginning to understand that this wasn't just a random insult. This was history. A wound someone kept reopening. Damien pointed again, finger up, voice louder now. "You know what I think," he said, addressing not just Jessica, but the room. "I think she's playing a role. Like she always does. New dress, new man, same story." The crowd reacted in a wave. Whispers, small laughs, a few disapproving looks. Jessica's chest tightened. She wanted to leave. But leaving now would be what Damien wanted. It would confirm to everyone that he still had the power to send her running. Junicio took one small step forward again. Not dramatic. Just enough. Damien's eyes snapped to him. "What?" Damien said, irritated now. "You going to threaten me?" Junicio's voice remained steady. "No." Damien scoffed. "Then what?" Junicio held his gaze. "I'm going to ask you a question." Damien blinked. "A question?" "Yes," Junicio said. "Why do you need an audience?" The room stilled. That question was sharp because it wasn't emotional. It was logical. Damien laughed too quickly. You're kidding. June SEO didn't blink. If you're right, speak to her privately. If you're wrong, you want witnesses so you feel powerful. Damien's face tightened. Jessica felt a strange sensation, like air entering a room that had been sealed for years. Damien's friend at the back tried to rescue him with laughter. Oh, come on, man, it's just banter. Junicio looked toward the sound briefly. Banter doesn't make people look like that. His eyes returned to Jessica. The crowd followed his gaze, and in that moment Jessica felt exposed in a different way. Not by Damien's cruelty, by the reality that people were now noticing her pain. Jessica's cheeks warmed. She hated being pitted. Damien seized the moment again. Look, he said, raising his hands as if he was the reasonable one. I'm not the bad guy here. I'm just telling her the truth. She always wants to rewrite the past. Jessica's throat worked. The past. He meant the months in chemo. The hair she lost. The nights she lay awake convinced she wouldn't see another year. The moments she fought for her life while Damien fought to keep his own life convenient. Jessica didn't say any of it. Not yet. Because this story wasn't about Damien learning he was wrong. It was about Jessica learning she didn't need his permission to exist. Juncio spoke again, still calm. Whatever the past is, he said, it doesn't give you the right to humiliate her. Damien's eyes flashed. You don't get to lecture me about my marriage. Jessica's voice was quiet. It wasn't a marriage. The words left her mouth before she could soften them. Damien froze. The room froze. Jessica looked at him steadily. It was a performance, she continued, voice low but clear. And I played my part until I almost died. A murmur rippled across the crowd. Damien's jaw clenched. Oh, here we go, he muttered, as if he was annoyed by the truth. Jessica didn't flinch. You think I came here to prove something, she said. I didn't. I came because I support the cause. Damien smirked. Oh yeah. Which cause is that? The one where you get attention. Junesio's hand lifted slightly, not to touch Damien, but to signal something. A boundary. His gaze was still fixed on Damien, and now the thought behind his eyes was sharper, clearer, impossible to misread. Who is this guy? And why is he mocking my wife publicly? And why is everyone letting it happen? Damien noticed the shift in Junesio's expression and tried to mock that too. What are you going to do? Damien asked. Stare me to death. Junesio's voice dropped, calm and precise. No. Damien's smile returned, relieved. Then relax. Junesio continued, eyes unwavering. I'm going to make sure you don't do this again. The room went still. That sentence wasn't a threat of violence. It was a promise of consequences. And in rooms like this, consequences were more frightening than fists. Damien laughed, but it sounded strained now. He looked around, trying to find allies in the crowd. Some people still smiled, but fewer. Others were watching him with the uncomfortable expression people wore when they realized they'd been enjoying something ugly. Jessica felt her breath shaking, and she hated it. She hated that after all these years, one man could still turn her into the version of herself she fought so hard to leave behind. Junesio's gaze softened just slightly as he looked at her again, and Jessica realized that he wasn't asking her to be strong for him. He was trying to be steady for her. Damien pointed again, desperate now to regain control. Jessica, he said, forcing charm into his voice. Tell him what you were like. Tell him why I had to leave. Jessica's hands loosened slowly. She lifted her chin. The ballroom felt quieter now, not because people had stopped breathing, but because they were listening. Jessica turned her head slightly toward Junecio, and for a brief moment she saw the question in his eyes again. Do you want me to end this? Jessica hesitated, because ending it meant revealing the part of her life she had buried. The part that would make people look at her with pity. The part that would make some people call her inspirational, like a compliment and a cage. But she also knew something else. There were women in rooms like this, and women watching from home, who needed to see what survival looked like when it wasn't pretty. She looked back at Damien. And in her calm, controlled voice she said, "You didn't leave because I was hard to love." Damien's smile faded. Jessica continued, steady now. "You left because you couldn't stand being needed." The words landed hard. The crowd murmured again, and Damien's eyes flashed with anger. He wasn't used to Jessica speaking like this. He wasn't used to her refusing to shrink. Junesio's expression tightened, that internal question turning into something colder. Who is this guy? And why did he think he could do this to her? Damien opened his mouth to strike back. And that was the moment someone in the crowd finally said the name out loud, clear enough for everyone to hear. Kang Junseo. Isn't that the CEO of KJ Group? The murmurs turned into ripples of shock. Damien's face changed instantly. Not because he cared about Jessica's pain. Because he cared about his own position. Because now he understood that the man standing slightly behind him wasn't just a handsome stranger. He was someone with the power to destroy reputations without raising his voice. Damien swallowed. He forced a laugh. "Okay," he said, trying to keep control. "So you're that guy." Junesio didn't correct him. He didn't need to. The room corrected Damien with silence. Jessica stood there, lilac gown glowing under chandelier light, and for the first time in a long time, she felt something unfamiliar rising through her fear. Not confidence. Not victory. A quiet certainty. She survived cancer. She survived Damien. And tonight, she wasn't going to survive in silence. Damien took a small step back, then caught himself, embarrassed that he had moved at all. He lifted his finger again, but this time it trembled. And Junesio noticed. He tilted his head, brows drawing together, expression still controlled but sharper now, as if the thought in his head had become a decision. Why is he mocking my wife publicly? And what will it take to make sure he never dares again? Damien's lips parted. He was about to say something that would either save him or ruin him. And Jessica, watching his face, realized the night wasn't even close to over. If this story is already tightening something in your chest, pause for 1 second. Like the video, subscribe, and stay with it. Because what happens next is where power quietly changes hands, and where Jessica's real battle finally comes into the light. And before we continue, ask yourself this. Have you ever survived something that changed you, only to realize people still judged you by the version of you that almost didn't make it? The silence in the ballroom did not feel empty. It felt weighted. Like everyone was holding the same breath, waiting to see who would crack first. Damien Hart tried to laugh it off. That had always been his instinct. Treat discomfort like a joke and hope charm could scrub it clean. Kang Juneseo, he said, testing the name like it might dissolve if he didn't say it correctly. I've heard of you. Juneseo didn't respond. He didn't step forward. He didn't step back. He simply stood there, hands relaxed at his sides, posture easy in a way that suggested he had never needed to prove himself in rooms like this. Damien cleared his throat. Well, congratulations, I guess, he added, forcing a smile. You married my ex-wife. Jessica flinched, not outwardly, but inside. The word ex-wife still carried weight, still tried to drag her backward. Junseo tilted his head slightly. No, he said. I married my wife. The distinction was small. The effect was not. A few people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Someone stopped smiling. Another person folded their arms, suddenly unsure which side of history they were standing on. Damien's jaw tightened. Right. Of course. Look, I don't want to make a scene. The irony almost made Jessica laugh. You already did, she said quietly. Her voice surprised even herself. It didn't shake. It didn't rise. It simply existed. Damien turned to her, eyes narrowing. Jessica, don't do this. Do what? She asked. Turn this into something it's not. Jessica held his gaze. For years, she had allowed him to define what things were and weren't. Allowed him to rewrite events until she doubted her own memory. Not tonight. This is exactly what it is, she said. You mocking me. Publicly. Again. Damien scoffed. You always take things too personally. That sentence, small, dismissive, hit deeper than his laughter ever had. Jessica felt something stir in her chest, not fear, but resolve. She remembered another room. Another kind of silence. A hospital consultation room with pale walls and a doctor who wouldn't quite meet her eyes. She remembered the word malignant and how it landed heavier than any insult Damien ever threw at her. She remembered reaching for Damien's hand that day, and how he hesitated before taking it, like her illness might be contagious. The ballroom blurred for half a second. Junesio noticed. He didn't touch her. He didn't interrupt. But his body shifted just enough to place himself between her and Damien without making it a spectacle. Damien noticed that too. "You see," Damien said, gesturing toward Junesio as if he were proving a point. "This is what I mean. She always needs someone to rescue her." Jessica's head snapped up. "I didn't survive cancer to be called helpless." The word cancer cut through the room. Not like a scream. Like a blade. Several people gasped. Others went still, faces rearranging themselves as shame crept in where curiosity used to be. Damien froze. He hadn't expected that. "You," he started, then stopped. "That was years ago." Jessica nodded. "Yes, it was." She took a breath, steadying herself. "And I survived it," she continued. "Without you." The room felt different now. Not entertained. Not amused. Attentive. Someone in the back whispered, "I didn't know." Another voice, quieter, "She looks amazing." Jessica almost smiled at that. Almost. Damien recovered enough to sneer. "Oh, please. Don't turn this into a sob story. Everyone goes through something." Junesio finally spoke again, his voice still calm, but colder now. "Everyone does not go through chemotherapy alone." That sentence landed harder than anything shouted could have. Damien's mouth opened, then closed. He looked around, searching for allies. He found none. Jessica felt the tremor in her hands fade. Not disappear. Fade. Like a storm easing instead of breaking. She had spent years hiding this part of her life, afraid it would reduce her to a headline. Afraid people would stop seeing her and only see what she survived. But standing here, she realized something she hadn't expected. The truth didn't weaken her. It stripped Damien of his last weapon. "You left," Jessica said, her voice level, "when I needed stability, not commentary. When my body was fighting for its life." Damien snapped. "That's not fair." She met his eyes. "Neither was laughing at me tonight." The crowd murmured again, louder this time. Disapproval was no longer subtle. Junesio watched Damien carefully. Not with rage. With calculation. Damien sensed it. "You think this makes you a hero?" he snapped at Junesio. "Marrying someone with baggage?" Junesio didn't hesitate. "I married someone with strength." That was when something inside Jessica finally cracked. Not in pain, but in release. 4 years, she had been defined by what she endured. Tonight, she was being defined by what she survived. Damien laughed weakly. "You don't even know what she put me through." Jessica inhaled slowly. "Do you really want to talk about what I put you through?" she asked. "Or what you couldn't handle standing beside?" Silence. The kind that corners people. Damien's face flushed. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He knew. The room knew. And for the first time, Jessica saw it clearly. He wasn't cruel because he was powerful. He was cruel because he was afraid. Junesio turned slightly toward the crowd. "This event," he said, his tone respectful but firm, "is meant to honor survival. Not mock it." A few people nodded. Someone clapped once, hesitantly, then stopped. Damien felt the momentum slipping. "Fine," he said, backing up half a step. "I'll leave. I don't need this." Jessica watched him retreat, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with something close to disbelief. He stopped, turned back one last time. "Just remember," Damien said, attempting one final strike, "you're not special because you got sick." Jessica smiled then. Not a bitter smile. A calm one. No, she said. I'm special because I didn't let it make me small. Damien turned and walked away. The room exhaled. Junicio looked at Jessica, his expression softer now, the earlier confusion replaced by respect. You okay? He asked quietly. She nodded. Better than I thought. The crowd began to disperse, murmurs replacing tension. But something had shifted permanently. Jessica wasn't the woman people whispered about anymore. She was the woman who stood. And somewhere in the room, unseen by most, a woman watching from the back wiped her eyes, because she was fighting the same disease Jessica had beaten, and for the first time that night, hope felt tangible. Jessica didn't notice her. But the impact was already spreading. And the night was far from over. The ballroom never fully returned to normal after Damien Hart left. Music resumed, but it sounded thinner, cautious, like the band was afraid of playing too loudly over what had just happened. Conversations restarted in fragments, but people kept glancing toward Jessica, then quickly looking away when she noticed. Public scenes had a way of rippling outward. What had begun as mockery had become something else entirely, an unspoken reckoning. Jessica stood still for a moment after Damien disappeared into the corridor, the echo of his retreat lingering longer than his presence ever had. Her chest rose and fell slowly, measured. She wasn't shaking anymore. The adrenaline had settled into a quiet, unfamiliar steadiness. Junicio stayed beside her, not touching, not hovering. He understood something most people didn't. Strength didn't always want comfort immediately. Sometimes it wanted space to breathe. Around them, the crowd shifted in tone. Faces that had earlier been entertained now looked thoughtful, uneasy, even embarrassed. A woman in an emerald gown murmured something to her partner and nodded in Jessica's direction. A man across the room lowered his glass, eyes thoughtful, like he was re-evaluating more than just the scene he'd witnessed. Jessica felt exposed in a new way, not as a target, but as a mirror. People hated mirrors. Junicio leaned slightly toward her. Do you want to leave? He asked quietly. She considered it. 4 years, leaving had been her survival instinct. Walk away before the humiliation deepened. Walk away before the pain turned public. Walk away before someone decided her weakness was entertainment. But tonight wasn't about escape. No, she said after a moment. Not yet. Junicio nodded once. No questions. No pressure. They stood together as the gala's host, a woman in her late 40s with kind eyes and practiced composure, approached them hesitantly. Jessica, she said softly. May I speak with you? Jessica braced herself. Another request to smooth things over. Another reminder that discomfort was inconvenient. Yes, she replied calmly. The host glanced briefly at Junicio, recognition flickering in her eyes now that she had the chance to really look at him. Respect followed quickly. I wanted to thank you, the woman said, for your honesty. Tonight is sensitive, but also important. Jessica tilted her head. I didn't mean to derail anything. You didn't, the host said. You reminded people why we're here. She hesitated, then added, if you're willing, I'd like to introduce you properly when we move into the testimonies segment. Only if you're comfortable. Jessica's heart skipped, not in fear, but in surprise. Testimonies. Stories. The part of the evening where survivors spoke, donors listened, and hope was packaged into applause. Jessica had planned to sit quietly through it. To be present, but invisible. She looked at Junicio. He didn't nod. He didn't shake his head. He waited. Jessica inhaled. For a long time, she had believed her survival story belonged to her alone. That speaking about it publicly would reduce it, turn it into inspiration porn or dinner table sympathy. But standing here now, she thought of the woman she'd never met, the one in the back of the room earlier, wiping her eyes quietly. She thought of hospital corridors. Of early mornings when survival felt like a full-time job. Of nights she'd wondered if she would ever feel normal again. I'll do it, Jessica said. The host's shoulders relaxed in visible relief. Thank you. When the woman walked away, Jessica felt her pulse quicken. You don't have to, Junicio said gently. I know, she replied. But I want to. He studied her face, then nodded. I'll be right there. The host returned to the stage moments later, microphone in hand. The room gradually quieted, curiosity replacing tension. Tonight, the host began, we gather not just to fund research, but to honor resilience. Jessica felt dozens of eyes drift toward her. Not hungry this time. Curious. Respectful. We often talk about survival in numbers and charts, the host continued. But survival is personal. And tonight, we have someone who embodies that truth. A pause. Please welcome Jessica Okoye. The applause began hesitantly, then grew. Jessica stepped forward. The light from the chandeliers seemed brighter now, warmer. She felt every step in her body, but it wasn't fear guiding her. It was resolve. She reached the microphone and stood there for a moment, allowing the applause to fade. She didn't rush. That was something cancer had taught her. Nothing meaningful happened when you rushed. My name is Jessica, she began. Her voice carried, steady and clear. And I'm not here because I plan to speak tonight. A ripple of soft laughter passed through the room. I'm here because sometimes survival asks more of you than just staying alive. Silence followed. She spoke simply. About the diagnosis. About fear. About the strange loneliness that came not just from illness, but from how people reacted to it. She didn't name Damien. She didn't need to. When I got sick, she said, I learned something no one prepares you for. Pain changes people. It reveals who can stand beside you, and who needs to look away. The room listened, not as spectators, but as witnesses. I survived breast cancer, Jessica said plainly. Not because I was fearless, but because I refused to disappear. She paused. And when I stood up tonight, it wasn't to relive that pain. It was to remind myself, and maybe someone else, that surviving something doesn't make you small. It makes you real. The applause that followed was different from before. It wasn't polite. It was earned. Jessica stepped back from the microphone, her chest tight, not with fear, but with emotion she didn't bother to restrain. Junso met her halfway, his hand brushing her elbow just enough to ground her. You were incredible, he said quietly. She exhaled. I was terrified. He smiled faintly. Both can be true. As the evening continued, the atmosphere transformed. Conversations deepened. Laughter softened. The gala regained its purpose. But the ripple didn't stop there. Across the room, phones lit up discreetly. Messages were typed. Names were searched. Kong Junisio didn't notice at first. He rarely did. But when his assistant approached him discreetly, expression tight, he knew something had shifted beyond the ballroom. Sir, the man murmured. The board is aware of the incident. And the media. Junisio's gaze flicked briefly to Jessica, who was being gently congratulated by a group of women near the stage. Good, he said calmly. His assistant blinked. Good. Yes, Junisio replied. Truth doesn't damage us. The man nodded, though uncertainty lingered. Across the room, a well-dressed couple whispered urgently. Did you see who that was? The woman said. Damien Hart just humiliated a cancer survivor. In public. The man frowned. That's going to follow him. Another group nearby murmured, Kong Junisio doesn't associate with scandals. Unless the scandal isn't his. Damien Hart's name began circulating, not with admiration, but with discomfort. Jessica didn't hear most of it. She was standing near the windows now, looking out over the city lights, her reflection faint in the glass. Junisio joined her. Are you okay? He asked. She nodded slowly. I didn't realize how much I was still carrying. He considered that. Survival doesn't mean the weight disappears. It means you get stronger carrying it. She smiled at that. After a moment, she asked quietly, Do you regret walking into that room? He shook his head immediately. No. What about what this might cause? She asked. For you. For your company. Junisio looked back at the crowd, at the donors, the cameras, the shifting alliances. If my success requires silence in the face of cruelty, he said, then it isn't success. Jessica studied him, seeing the depth beneath the calm. You didn't even know what you were walking into. I knew enough, he replied. Someone was hurting you. That was all. The night ended with donations surpassing expectations. With handshakes that lingered. With quiet conversations about accountability and compassion. But elsewhere in the city, Damien Hart stared at his phone, watching his mentions multiply, his narrative slipping out of his control. He told himself it was nothing. A misunderstanding. A dramatic exaggeration. But even as he thought it, he knew better. Because for the first time, the room had not belonged to him. And the woman he once dismissed as fragile had stood in the center of it, unbroken. Jessica left the gala later that night with Junicio by her side, the city air cool against her skin. She didn't feel victorious. She felt free. And as they stepped into the waiting car, a question lingered, not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed the moment. What happens when the people you underestimated stop surviving quietly? The answer was already unfolding. Before this story ends, pause with me for a moment. If you're watching this while fighting breast cancer, or if you've already beaten it, this part is for you. Like the video, subscribe, and stay to the very end, because what happens now isn't just about revenge or dignity. It's about what survival looks like when it finally stops whispering and starts standing tall. And let me ask you this, honestly. What would change in your life if the thing that almost broke you became the proof that nothing else ever could? The days after the gala moved quickly, but the consequences moved faster. By morning, the video clips were everywhere. Someone had filmed Damien Hart pointing his finger. Someone else had captured Jessica's voice, steady, unflinching, as she said the words that refused to be buried. Another clip showed Kong Junicio standing just behind her, calm and unreadable, like a line that should never have been crossed. The internet did what it always did. It picked a side. And for once, the side it picked wasn't power. It was the truth. Headlines didn't scream. They didn't need to. Finance executive faces backlash after publicly mocking cancer survivor. Kong Junicio's wife speaks out at charity gala. Mockery, survival, and silence. A night that changed the room. Jessica read none of them. Not at first. She sat in her apartment that morning, sunlight stretching across the floor, a cup of tea cooling in her hands. The quiet felt earned, not lonely. For years, mornings had begun with scans, pills, reminders, fear dressed up as routine. Even after remission, her body remembered the fight. Some days she woke up strong. Some days she woke up tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. But today, the tiredness felt different. Lighter. Like something heavy had finally been set down. Junicio moved through the apartment quietly, respectful of the stillness. He had already taken 3 calls and declined 6 interviews before breakfast. Your phone, he said gently, setting it on the table. You don't have to look. Jessica smiled faintly. I will. Just, not yet. He nodded. Take your time. That was something Damien never understood. Time wasn't something you demanded. It was something you were given. Across the city, Damien Hart's morning was unraveling. His assistant stood in the doorway, pale. Sir, the board wants an emergency meeting. Damien rubbed his face. This is being blown out of proportion. It's not just public backlash, the assistant said carefully. Several partners are reconsidering. Damien laughed, sharp and brittle. Because of one comment? The assistant hesitated. Because it wasn't one comment. It was a pattern. And now people are watching. Watching. That word haunted him. For years, Damien had controlled rooms with confidence and volume. He had learned early that if you spoke first and spoke loudest, no one questioned your authority. But now, people weren't listening to him. They were listening to her. Jessica Okoye. The woman he once dismissed as weak. The woman he thought illness would erase. At the hospital across town, a woman named Amara watched the clip on her phone from a narrow bed by the window. Her head was wrapped in a scarf. Her 4-line hummed quietly beside her. She had been diagnosed 6 months ago, and every day since had felt like borrowed time. She watched Jessica stand under chandelier light and speak calmly about survival. Amara felt something shift in her chest. Not fear, not sadness. Hope. If she can stand like that, Amara whispered to no one, maybe I can too. In another city, another woman, 5 years cancer-free, shared the video with a simple caption. This is what surviving looks like. Messages poured in. Not praise. Recognition. Jessica finally opened her phone that evening. She didn't scroll far. She didn't need to. One message stopped her. Thank you for saying it out loud. I thought surviving meant staying quiet. Jessica exhaled slowly. She typed back only 3 words. You are seen. The next week, Kong Joon SEO did something unexpected. He declined an award. The press buzzed immediately. When asked why, his response was simple. Recognition that requires silence in the face of cruelty is not recognition I want. It was quoted everywhere. Damien Hart resigned 2 days later. The statement was polished, neutral, carefully worded. Personal reasons. Time to reflect. Jessica read it once. Then she closed the article. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure. Weeks passed. Life didn't transform into perfection. Healing never worked like that. Some days Jessica still felt the echo of pain in her body. Some nights fear crept in quietly, reminding her how close she once came to losing everything. But something fundamental had changed. She no longer flinched at her past. She no longer treated survival like a secret. At another charity event, smaller, quieter, Jessica stood among other survivors. No chandeliers. No cameras. Just women. Stories. Strength. She listened more than she spoke. And when she did speak, it wasn't about Damien. It was about mornings you don't think you'll see. About learning to trust your body again. About losing people, not just to illness, but to discomfort. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that makes them comfortable, Jessica said softly. Survival isn't gratitude. It's courage. Junso watched her from across the room. Not as a protector. As a witness. That night, as they walked home together, Jessica paused under a streetlight, the city humming around them. Do you ever think about the timing? She asked quietly. Junso glanced at her. Of what? That if I hadn't gotten sick, if I hadn't survived, I might still believe him. He stopped walking. That doesn't mean the pain was necessary, he said gently. It means you are. Jessica smiled. She looked up at the sky, dark and endless. For so long, she thought survival was about endurance. She had been wrong. Survival was about arrival. Arriving in your body. Arriving in your voice. Arriving in a life that no longer asked you to apologize for being alive. And somewhere, unseen but real, women fighting battles inside their bodies felt a little less alone. Because one woman stood in a lilac dress and refused to be mocked into silence. Because she lived. Because she spoke. Because survival, once hidden, had finally taken its place in the light. And if this story leaves you with anything, let it be this. You are not weak because you were hurt. You are not small because you struggled. And the thing that tried to break you does not get to define how loudly you stand afterward. If this story touched you in any way, don't just scroll past it. Leave a red heart in the comments for every woman fighting breast cancer right now, and a flexed biceps for every survivor who made it through. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs strength today.